Okay, welcome to the January 12th workshop of the Philipstown Town Board. Tara, I guess we have one agenda item that you have to address.
We do. So the first item on the agenda is, now bear with me, this is long, is a resolution consenting to all senior citizens homeowner exemption and disabled homeowner exemptions from the 2021 assessment roll carry over to the 2022 assessment roll at the same levels without the filing of a renewal application as provided by the governor's executive order, and authorizing the town assessor to require a renewal application to be filed for any property which received the said exemption or exemptions on the 2021 assessment roll, but may no longer qualify for such exemption by reason of the owner having changed his or her primary residence, added another owner to the deed, transferred the property to a new owner, or died, and to accept filing of such applications by postal mail or electronic means. And this is a roll call vote.
So this was brought to our attention by Brian Kenny, our assessor. It was something that was passed at the New York State level. It basically enables people to mail this in instead of coming in person and jeopardizing their health and the health of our assessors. So can I get a resolution, a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It is a roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote. I'm sorry. Councilman Flaherty,
Aye.
Councilwoman Farrell,
Aye.
Councilwoman Cotter.
Aye.
Is Jason on? Is Jason on yet?
Yes.
Councilman Angel.
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you.
You got it. So Tara, you're done this evening. We're going to go ahead with the workshop. So thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tara.
Bye,
Thanks,
Tara.
Tara.
Bye.
Tara, who's hosting now? Is Judy hosting or?
No, Cecilia is. Cecilia's on, and when you get to agenda item number 3 with Karen Erdl, Karen, Cecilia, and I have already talked about it. Karen is going to share her screen and do a little presentation, but they should have that all settled.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Okay, so before we get started, I do have to mention one thing. Last Thursday night, we discussed the needs for smoke detectors because of a fatal fire in Philadelphia. And once again, we had another one this week in New York. Obviously, it was tragic, 17 fatalities. I was watching the news tonight. Apparently, the smoke detectors did work, but nobody paid attention to them because they go off so often. However, every person that died did die from smoke inhalation and not from the flames. So fireman in me again is going to remind everybody to check your smoke detectors, put new batteries in it because they do save lives. And it could save your life. So please make sure you check it. So moving right along, we're going to start with Crystal Ford for the Climate Smart Committee and Jeff Domansky about the opt-out community solar program. Crystal, are you on?
I am on, and believe that Jeff actually has a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. Seal, you can share that with everybody? Oh yeah, there it is.
So I'll let Jeff go first, and we'll kind of like go
Okay.
back and forth a little bit.
Are you there, Jeff?
Yep, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
How are you?
I am well. It's good to see you all. Apologize, you want me to be seen here? I can put my video on if I can figure that out. Well, actually, I'll leave my video off just as we talk about the slides. I think you guys have seen me in the past, and I hope you don't mind just taking a look at the slides. I really appreciate this opportunity and so glad to be working with Crystal on this. I am Jeff Domansky. I'm the executive director of the nonprofit that is the partner in the Hudson Valley Community Power Program. You know, my nonprofit program is called Hudson Valley Energy. We very much glad to be here tonight because we really confuse people a lot with the overlapping names that we use. Energy, community, Hudson Valley, it's all a mishmash often for folks. So it's really a good opportunity to come here I have a bit of an update. It's a good update on what we've been doing with the Hudson Valley Community Power Program, which I think most know, but I won't assume everyone, that it's the town's community choice aggregation program, the CCA. And it is something where you'll see, I use an analogy of a Swiss Army knife coming up, that it's a tool that the town has enabled itself to use to offer a number of benefits to the community members. And what we've largely been focused on are two of the components. And again, they're often very confused. So the intent of tonight is to review what the program is, what these different tools are, which tools we've used so far in Philipstown, and a third tool, which sounds a heck of a lot like the second tool, but is something very different and very powerful and potentially very exciting. And again, there's no firm lock-in to do this. So it's really getting the town, all the leadership comfortable, hopefully excited by what we've done and maybe excited by what we can do going forward. And so it's, again, there's components within the umbrella of community choice aggregation. And we'll talk about CCA, what I call CCA supply, which is about the electricity supply program, and CCA community solar, which is two different types of tools coming up. So Crystal, do you want to say anything else before I dive into the content?
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, we've been scheming about how to approach this and talking about the timeline, Crystal and I. So we thought, and we're very, again, grateful that you gave us this time to talk about this. All right, so CCA, this general policy called CCA, it is, like I said, a Swiss Army knife. And if you look at the arrows, the local law that Philipstown passed way back, I think in 2018, if not a little sooner, was an enabling law that gave Philipstown the ability to use all the tools that are in the body of the Swiss Army knife. I'm hearing a bit of background from there. Maybe I'll wait till that goes away.
Could everyone?
Yeah, if anything, everyone put their phones, put everybody on mute, please, except for Jeff.
He's only been a paramedic for about a year and a half. And
It's good. You guys get to look at the Swiss Army knife picture while we wait for the mute.
So
All right, I think we're not yet.
That could be Peg Moran, maybe.
You know, we just got to keep track of everything. We had a call on Sunday that there was some issues with the medic.
I think you're good, Jeff.
All right, except that I was muted too. Now I'm unmuted. Okay, so think about the local law that you passed way back in, I think, 2018 as this body of the Swiss Army knife, and there's tools inside that knife. The upper left tool is the one that has been of the major focus. It's focused on electricity supply, and I'm actually going to show a utility bill to make sure we understand the differences and what these things mean with regards to what it looks like from a community member's perspective with their utility bill. But the main tool that we've talked about and focused on to date has been this electricity supply buying club. This idea that towns can aggregate together, communities can aggregate together to give a new choice for electricity supply rate. And our focus has been on this win-win scenario of grouping together to have leverage to get a very, very competitive fixed rate for 100% renewables from New York State sources that had the promise and has been beating the non-renewable rate that people would get through Central Hudson's decision-making if they stayed with that. And you guys might know there was a very concerted effort to encourage people to opt into that second tool in the lower left, community solar, on an opt-in model. And this is the one that's going to take on a third flavor with an opt-out model that mirrors the way the electricity supply program worked, where it was offered out to all community members, all eligible members on an opt-out basis. So and I'll get into this in details in the timeline of a transition from an opt-in on community solar to an opt-out. And there are other tools in this CCA Swiss Army knife analogy toolbox that we could talk about in future days, and other CCAs, like in Westchester, have used them. But for now, we're going to focus just on what's on the left here. So the timeline, what have we done so far in Philipstown? like I said, the first tool that we focused on was the Community Choice Electricity Supply Program, with a focus on a default and opt-out choice for 100% New York State renewables. That started in 2019. It was a 2-year contract that started in July of 2019. And it went well enough that all but one of the 10 original communities renewed. Philipstown did renew, and we launched a 3-year contract for a fixed rate for 100% renewables in July of 2021. So we're just in the beginnings of that contract, or many months in, but still relatively new. It is a fixed rate. This is something where the town entered into an agreement on behalf of their community members. So no individual community member has a contract. There's complete flexibility. I often say it's like you gave everybody a membership to a swimming pool and they can take it or leave it, but they do have to start out by saying if they don't want it. It is something where everything is on the one bill, the one central Hudson bill. So nice and simple, no logistic change. And with that flexibility, everybody could opt out at any time. And I'm going to jump to a chart here to show you how the program's been performing since the new contracts in a second. But first, let's talk about where it lives on your central Hudson bill. And just a brief education about, this is the meaty page, if you will, of your central Hudson bill, or your online account if you're looking at it online. And many of you know this, but what I emphasize is that it's 2 bills in one, your central Hudson bill. There are delivery charges and there are supply charges. And the top small box is circling the start of the section for delivery. And that's the section by which Central Hudson and other New York utilities make money. They get paid to make sure electricity gets from where it's made to their customers. They're not allowed to make money on the generation of electricity. That is created the supply marketplace. So the supply decision is about where the power is made, how it's made, and how much it costs. And that's the middle section of the bill, shown in the middle red box. And for those of you who know the way it looks when you're in the program, the CCA electricity supply line item is right there. And it's just one line item, and it's the one fixed rate. So this was the previous rate for the 2-year contract. I didn't update my image, but back then it was 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour. Now we're at about 6.6 cents if you round up from 6.57. But that single fixed rate stays the same for the duration of the contract and gets multiplied by somebody's use. So that's where supply lives. And we get to emphasize it does not have any impact on Central Hudson's business model. They are still a delivery company and they still handle all the billing. So that fixed rate for the new contract is shown here on this chart for the new contract as the green line. It's that 6.573 cents number I said. Started on July 1st and it runs all the way through June of 2024. And you can see I have here a comparison chart updated to this morning. Actually, I published it. I saw the new number published by Central Hudson, and Central Hudson's number, varying month to month, is the yellow number, the yellow line. So we started out with their number higher than our program rate, our 100% renewable default rate, and it went up and up and up. Took a little dip in November, but then jumped way back up to 10.9 cents as of this morning. So the blue line is the average of the running average of the yellow line. So the fixed rate program's been going great. We've been well below Central Hudson's rate. So in essence, we're delivering very good cost savings in that win-win scenario for the community members that are still in the program. So that's the buying club for electricity supply. Many of you might recall that Jewel, the administrator who I'm partnered with, was very excited about the CCA Swiss Army knife as a way to encourage people to not only take advantage of what could happen with electricity supply, but to also cut through confusion and to give them a well analyzed and vetted contract for something called community solar. And this is for, in essence, virtual ownership of a portion of a solar field that's in Central Hudson territory. And it's for people who don't have solar on their building, or their home or business, or on their land. They're not compatible. It's one or the other. You can't do community solar if you have solar in your home or business, but community solar was enabled in the state as a vehicle to give everyone else the opportunity to reap benefit from the growth and expansion and interest in growing more of solar and other renewable generation methods, including hydro in the state. So this also started in 2019, and it was a partnership to basically spread information of as I said before, a vetted contract that people could opt into if they wanted to. So this was an opt-in community solar program. And we worked with the leadership, including our previous supervisor, and distributed information. And it encouraged more than 150 people.
Yeah.
But Eric Brown is supposed to be on talking about.
I'm sorry, folks, I'm sorry. I can hear some background talking. If you can just mute or thanks. So in the opt-in program, more than 150 Philipstown residents opted in. They entered into a contract for community solar. And I'll talk about the benefits, and they're shown in the small type in that flyer that we used and distributed for the program. But in essence, it's a guaranteed cost savings, targeted at roughly between approximately 10% of their total electric spend. So it sounded too good to be true, but it's a very good symbiotic opportunity out there, and many people took advantage of it, which also had some grant dollar savings benefit or grant dollar benefits for Philipstown for the refrigerant management program. But it was an opt-in program. It required a contract, and because of the logistics, because of some recalcitrance upon the utilities in New York State, it was not a one bill situation. There was two separate bills if you were a community solar subscriber. You had your Central Hudson bill, upon which you would get a significant savings in the payments and adjustments section, as I'll show you on the upcoming image. But you also got a bill from the solar provider that you were in contract with that was always 90% of the savings that you got on a monthly basis. So you had this logistical challenge, if you will, of having to pay two different bills, making arrangements. So for that reason, particularly, we left it as an opt-in program. Even though it was very advantageous, it was still something we would not do as an opt-out because of that two bill situation. Well, at the end of 2019, the state mandated that utility companies stop the two bill hurdle and required that they do something called consolidated billing for community solar. And it was completed by utility companies around the state, all of them, by April of 2020, which means that logistical hurdle is gone. So Joule, having already been approved by the state to proceed with an opt-out community solar program, jumped on doing that. They'd already done preparations and launched opt-out community solar in a few communities. And they're very excited to do it in the Hudson Valley. And I'll talk about that in a second. But on the bill description about where this community solar or any solar benefit lives, I show it down here in the payments and adjustments section to emphasize that this is something that is often confused, but is very different than the electricity supply buying club program. The community solar is not about a rate. It's not associated with how much electricity you use in a particular month. They look at your historic usage to assign you a portion of that solar field in Central Hudson territory, and the amount of electricity that portion of a solar field generates on a particular month is converted into a dollar savings, really just down to a monetary transaction. And you can see this is actually my bill from this April period, and I saved $81 because of my subscription to a community solar project. But it exclusively lives down here in the payments and adjustment section, separate from supply, separate from delivery. But as an opt-in subscriber, I have this credit, but I also have a separate community solar bill, which for this month would have been 90% of this. So I ended up in the positive, but I did have to pay a separate bill, just make those arrangements. Well worth it for the benefit and for the contribution of demand for the grid, but still a logistical hurdle. But that hurdle is now gone. And so now we are very interested in moving forward with communities that we think will be excited too for an opt-out program. So this is Community Choice Solar. That's the name that Joule is using. I call it CCA Community Solar often, just to keep it aware that it's still part of CCA. But it's an opt-out program that we anticipate will be able to be rolled out in Marbletown, in Ulster County, in Beacon, and in Philipstown as long as there's interest, later in 2022. Anticipate probably with some things that are happening in the state that it would probably be the fall of 22 when this would go live. Different from the opt-in community solar, there is no individual contract. There's no credit check. Because of consolidated billing, it's one bill. Logistically, it's the same thing that we did with opt-out electricity supply. It's all logistically the same. And as before, with anything under CCA, anybody could opt out at any time. So even though it's offered as an opt-out program, nobody is locked into doing it. But this does come with just a guaranteed savings, which is different than the electricity supply program. It's doing very well, but there is not a guaranteed savings there. So same image you saw before, but you just notice the only thing different about this slide is I crossed off the separate community solar bill. So where opt-out community solar moves forward, that there's only the one bill, just the Central Hudson bill that people have to worry about. The credit would be smaller because the payment pass through to the community solar owner would be included, but it's still a negative. It's still a deduction on a customer's bill. So this is just a summary of what community solar and community choice solar offer. The left side is just general community solar, including what individuals could do on their own if they wanted to. Generally, if you pursue community solar, people do so because there are guaranteed electricity bill savings, as bill credits. It is an alternative to having to put material equipment on your roof. For our program, there's no sign up or cancellation fees, and people should look for contracts if they're doing it individually that also have those components of it. And it does support local generation, renewable energy generation. On the right column, the added benefits of doing a CCA community choice solar program is that there is no credit check. Jewel vets the suppliers, and the partnership of community and the administrator, Jewel, enters into agreement so that there is no contract for participants. And very importantly is that second bullet there that I just skipped over, the idea of better terms and maximum savings. It's the one simple component that answers the question to community leaders when they ask what, these programs, these elements, these tools in this Swiss Army knife analogy, they are based on opportunities that utility customers have always as individual customers. Any customer could go and enter into a supply contract with a company if they wanted to for a fixed rate. Any customer could enter into a community solar contract for that guaranteed savings if they wanted to. But what has really become evident to me after working with these companies and having literally thousands of conversations with utility customers in New York State is the numerous ways that companies can not offer the maximum savings or the best terms to customers. You probably have a firsthand experience or definitely know many people who've had bad experiences in the energy marketplace, either in a fixed rate program, and maybe you're even hearing stories about community solar, though I don't know if many people know to what degree there is the ability to not maximize the offer of community solar. So the beauty of this CCA program generally is the partnership of the administrator with the community leadership, with my organization and assistance. We basically press the companies that are either going to be suppliers or community solar providers to give the best that they can give. And community members don't have to worry about reading the fine print of a contract to make sure that that's happening. So that's the beauty of this, is that it is truly a simple, vetted gift, if you will, to community members to give them the best of what's out there without any restrictions or commitment requirements. So, so it answers that question, why should we do this if people could do it themselves? It's because you are both protecting them from missteps and optimizing the benefit that they can yield from these things. So just kind of in summary, we're talking about CCA as one program, and we're focusing on these two components: the renewable electricity supply program, that's the default for residents, the low fixed rate, the opt-out at any time, and community solar being the guaranteed savings. In addition, I wanted to include the slide though, because it has some additional detail in terms of the who we're talking about. The second bullet under community choice solar emphasizes the thought that is predominant in the administrators who are considering offering opt-out community solar. There is not an infinite amount of solar projects out there available for communities that might be interested in opt-out community solar or community solar generally. So there's a discussion about who should have priority when these are rolled out. If it can't be given, which is not a, you know, we don't know that yet, but if there's not enough community solar subscriptions for an entire community, who should be given priority? And currently the thought is to give it to, and forgive the acronym, but the low and median income customers in the community. That's LMI is a common in my field acronym for low and median income customers, those for whom the utility bill is a more significant burden. And so that is something that is a very interesting and exciting discussion point that is to be determined in partnership about how to proceed and, you know, who will get the benefit of the program. So that's a very important emphasis of why I included this slide. And it does support local community solar farms. You know, it's a doubling basically of the demand on the grid for more renewables. And there is the benefit, as you might recall, with the opt-in community solar, there was more than $7,000 generated by Jewel deciding to share their commission, in essence, with Philipstown for Philipstown refrigerant management program. So that's the earning dollars for local sustainability projects. This is the menu slide that I can come back to, just emphasizing that there's a, you know, these are parallel opportunities. You can do the electricity supply program and you can do a solar program, mix and match, or neither. So I can come back to this if we need it. But then my last slide is this, the very, very wordy slide for next steps. And I'll just go through it briefly, and it might be a good source for questions. But the next steps, you know, with an anticipation of jumping down to the bottom that this might be a fall 2022 offer when it goes live, we will, when it's appropriate, which is not immediate, have a kickoff meeting of the leadership and key committees with climate smart communities and other members in the town to kick off this program. And we will put information on the town website as part of that initial step. And then there is public education, which mirrors what we did for the supply program, a lot of awareness building, education and outreach, which needs to be approved by the state. And then if it's approved and we can proceed with the program, we get to dig into the discussion about if there's not enough for everybody in the town, who should be the priority eligible customers. And then once that's decided, all of the elements that we collectively agree should be included go into the request for proposals to find out how much there is to offer in detail. Jewel will have an idea of that for the previous conversation about how much is available. But then the RFP leads to the acquisition of the subscriptions that can be given out on the opt-out basis. And then Philipstown, seeing that it all meets the requirements, would sign an agreement at that point in time. And that is the only point at which there is commitment to proceed. There is ongoing education and outreach. And then everyone who's going to be given an opt-out subscription would receive a letter from the town describing what's happening there. If they don't want it, they're given 30 days to say they don't want it, but they can always say no at a later date too. Those who stay in and keep the subscription are enrolled, transitioned in, and then the program would go live and they'd start to see credits on their bill, hopefully with the logistics all in place in 2022. So those are the steps, and then just wanted to make sure that there, again, was understanding of the different components of what can be a very confusing but fantastic opportunity under community choice aggregation, and kind of set the stage for what I'm hoping will be some upcoming conversations for us for next steps. So
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Thanks for the time too. I know there was a lot there.
No, that was very informational. I appreciate it. So, Crystal, do you have anything to add?
So I just, you know, I've also have been a part of my own community solar program. I was using Nexamp for probably about 2-3 years, and I tracked my savings, and I was saving $350 a year on the electricity. So I know that the savings, I'm like, yes, the savings are definitely there, and I think it would be great if we're able to offer more savings to more people in the town, because, you know, electricity is one of those price sensitive things for people. And it would be great to be supporting more solar if it's done in a very responsible manner. I agree with the comment that, you know, where the solar is located to me is very important. If I hear that they're clear cutting trees to put in solar, like that's a no-go for me. But I love the idea of like brown sites and like where they're siting it and being a part of it and supporting that as much as we can. So that's just my input there.
Appreciate it. Jeff, do you anticipate a supply shortage going forward, or do you think that there is enough available currently locally that would suffice for the town if we were to sign up?
The current expectation on the timelines that are being talked about is that there likely not be enough for all of the community members in just those few towns that that Jewel is prioritizing right now. And that's why there is that discussion. You know, I wanted to definitely include that bullet point about the priority customers that we might want to emphasize. But it's too early to say, but I just want to set the stage that that is a possibility, that there would not be sufficient for everybody. And there is different ways to approach this. As I've learned, if nothing else, it's not a black and white proposition, any of these programs. For example, if it is extreme importance to give it to everyone in a community, the amount of savings can be reduced to share across a wider population. The minimum has to be a 5% savings. The goal is for the 10% savings on credits, but there is multiple ways to do it, and that is part of the conversation. And I'll also say, seeing the comments that Crystal mentioned in the chat, that would the citing, the sourcing of which projects would be included based on where they were built, and that they didn't include clear cutting. That is part of the conversation about the priorities, which I think Jewel already has in mind for the ones that they're reaching out to. But it could be more of an emphasis. They are not necessarily, for example, focusing exclusively on brownfield developments, but it could be for the community saying, we only want to, partner with community solar developers who are doing brown site development. So
Okay.
let me just answer that. Actually, to one,
Yeah.
at least a couple other questions. There was a question from Karen, if we have a opt-in contract with Nexamp, can we keep it? Absolutely. No one gets kicked out of their arrangement. You are already considered in a good way an ineligible customer in that sense if you already have a community solar arrangement or solar on your home. And Karen's question was, if we are with Community Choice Solar, are we still supporting all types of green energy? In this case, we're exclusively supporting solar fields for the most part in Central Hudson territory. But so that is kind of, but to some, that's a great advantage. So then Catherine said, I'm a Nexamp customer. Will they be the company involved in the opt-out program? It's to be determined. They could be one of the companies that brings projects to it, but it's what I love about this too. It's not an exclusive arrangement. Jewel is going to, when they issue the RFP, they're going to gather all that they can that meet the criteria that we all have for types of projects. And it'll be very likely more than one company. And if I was just to go on, I see a question, I'll read it. But anyone else have a question while I read this last question that came in?
And I just wanted to make a comment, Jeff, that
Please, Jason, yes.
yeah, I mean, thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, to me, why all of this stuff can be confusing, why the opt-out solar option is so important is because we all know that we need to make a transition to renewable energy as quickly as possible, right? And that what this is doing, basically by sourcing local renewable projects directly into our CCA electricity supply, you notice when Jeff put up that slide that only 152 residents had taken advantage of community solar. It's because it's like you have to sign an individual contract. You have to go out and get those customers. And from a solar developer perspective, that adds a lot of cost to getting people to come into the program. And so this is kind of getting rid of that barrier and lowering the cost of solar and making it more competitive, which it already is with fossil fuels. And so to me, it's really exciting that this is kind of Marbletown has done it first. If Philipstown and Beacon take that step, it's really removing a major barrier that many people haven't figured out in terms of bringing more local solar into the supply. So it's really exciting.
And such an important point, Jason. Thank you for cutting to the chase of something I didn't emphasize enough. But in addition to that too, it reduces hurdles in the sense from a customer perspective of the necessity, the burden of having to read through a contract and making sure everything is good there. And additionally, you do not have to, as we all did who signed into the opt-in, you do not have to give payment arrangement information. You don't have to give your bank account or your credit card to some other company. This, in an opt-out program, the consolidated billing beauty is that you just pay your money to Central Hudson, and Central Hudson distributes it where it needs to go, whether it be to the supplier or to the community solar developer. So that's the beauty of consolidated billing. So it cuts through this, it seems too good to be true, resistance that is very, very understandable. And in addition, the resistance that people have because of the bad experiences, the bad actors that have been in the energy marketplace. So it really does just, smooth the highway to take advantage of very good things that have the overlapping benefits of helping us get to where we need to go in terms of the state goals, in terms of renewable development and climate and greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Jeff, this is Judy. I think the last time we did this, there was some confusion because Central Hudson sent out a letter. So are we going to have control over that process with the letter for people to opt out if they desire, or the letter about the initiative? Because I think before, when this happened, there was a Central Hudson letter that confused a lot of folks.
Yeah, there was a lot of public outcry over the program. And I think, Judy, you nailed it, that there needs to be a better explanation of who's in, who's out, and how to opt out. So I know I personally got a lot of complaints about not being able to opt out, but we have a program, it seems like it's laid out pretty well here, Jeff. So when would you expect that process to begin? And when do you want to come back and make a presentation to the town?
Well, realistically, when Crystal and I started talking about this, Jewel was very anxious to move forward. And Jason, just for an update, Marbletown is still in the hold pattern too, because we thought they were going to launch, and we thought that we were going to be able to start moving with an RFP almost about now was when Jewel was interested in doing it. But the state, and to use an analogy with some degree, where they're aligning the design of the program, they put a hold on moving forward with any opt-out community solar programs, just to make sure there's alignment across all stakeholders. So it was a 90-day that we're in the middle of. I think it might go a little bit longer than 90 days. So I think this will likely be an early springtime return to you guys to request that kickoff meeting, or to do some planning to get to a kickoff meeting. So I think we'll have a quiet winter, but I'm really glad to set the stage with this conversation now so that there's understanding, and I can answer questions on the interim. And if you want me to come back in small meetings to explain how this works or give updates, I'm more than happy to do so.
Well, in an effort to keep this meeting rolling, and we'll certainly have plenty of public discussion when you're ready, it's sometime April, May, if you're end of spring. So I would appreciate if we could just move on to the next item, and we'll hear from you soon. And I appreciate the—
Right, thank you guys. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So
Thank
next up is Karen Erdl and Eric Brown on food scrap recycling pilot program. Karen, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You need a second, or are you ready to go?
I just have to share my screen.
Okay. Hi, Karen.
There we go. Okay. This is new for me, John, so bear with me.
No judging here, that's for sure.
Okay. All right. We have a very brief presentation, and it really it's a request night. I guess that's the best thing we can say is we've been working on this. The Climate Task Force has been working on this for a long time, and we feel we're confident at this point that we have what we need to go forward. So in the October meeting that we had at the board workshop, we put together a small team that went to see the village of Scarsdale, because they have a quite ambitious recycling center, which reduces tremendous amounts of waste from the town, and has been able to cut the amount of garbage sent to landfills, as well as municipal costs, by providing greater opportunities for the community pre-sorting of wastes. And we were amazed that their food scrap recycling program for the village took up 2 parking spaces. Signage was very, very important, so people knew where to go. It was Halloween, and they actually recycled for compost pumpkins also. And afterwards, the team who went said their comments were things like, let's do it. It was compact, it was clean, it was easy to run. We should look for options to do curbside pickup later in the program, and also return compost to the community. Back in 2020, Philipstown did an inventory report on greenhouse gas emissions. And in that, there were several findings. One was there was a strong community desire to increase positive attitudes towards climate change. Food production, which was defined, food production was defined as emissions created through production, distribution, and disposal of goods and services we purchase and consume. And that part of the waste stream was in the top 5 greenhouse gas emitters. Both community and individual household food production was also found to be contributing factors in greenhouse gas emissions. Using the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute food waste estimator, if we were to sign up 100 families, have 100 participants, we could remove from the landfill waste 34,000 pounds of food a year, or 17 tons of food a year, and return it to compost that ultimately could come back to residents. The major thrust of the pilot program would be community education regarding ways to reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover. We are asking that the board consider appointing an ad hoc committee to oversee the implementation of a food scrap drop-off site pilot, monitor services and address any issues that may come up, provide education and outreach to residents. And the Climate Smart Task Force has received grant funding, which from other projects that Crystal has been successful in recruiting the community toward. And we would like permission to use that for the startup costs for this pilot. Just to remind everybody that, the EPA recovery hierarchy, we're basically working here on the source reductions and landfill and incineration, as well as composting. We are lucky that we live in a community where there are lots of other things happening to remove food from the waste stream and make it reusable, a reusable commodity. To quote the Philipstown inventory report, the status quo is not acceptable because they have set the goal that carbon neutral by 2040. So that's where we are at, John, and the board. And we're hoping that we will get permission to go forward.
Well, it's certainly exciting. And I appreciate all the work that you've done already, and the site visit to Scarsdale. I'm disappointed I didn't get to go with you, but we had a great crew go down and came back with all positive feedback. So for me, it certainly seems like a wonderful start, and I'm more than happy to look for volunteers for the ad hoc committee. You need 2 board members from the town board is what you're looking for?
I see Eric down there, and he's nodding his head too. What we're asking for as far as the advisory committee to the board would be 2 members of the task force, which we already have, and 2 members of a board representative. It doesn't have to be the board, but somebody who could act with us to guide us, to make sure we're not going where we shouldn't go. And then that committee, we would bring people in as necessary from the town, the village, wherever. But the advisory board, the advisory committee to the board, we're thinking 4 people would be plenty.
Well, we do have a farmer that's on the town board, and I'm hoping he's got his hand up and he's willing to participate.
Well, when you frame it that way, John, it's almost impossible to say no. But I would be happy to participate because it sounds so exciting.
Do I have any other volunteers on the board, or Crystal, would you want to be on it? I mean, we certainly could use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm assuming we'd have to take the resolution and have the town attorney review it. And then we could approve it at the February meeting. Does that work for you, Karen?
That would be great, John.
John, I
Okay.
just have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Where do you want to put this in the town?
Well,
I mean,
that's what-
it's only 2 parking spots, but where where do you want it?
There are a
George-
lot of moving parts that we haven't been able to go forward with because we really need a committee that sits down and explores. For example, there are municipal sites, there are private sites. What do we want to happen, in the area where we cite this? It obviously would have to be centrally located somewhere, but there are sites owned by the town. There are sites that are private. So at the moment, that would be something I would want to get input from this advisory board. And then through everybody's experience and understanding, to bring forth a recommendation.
I
Mhm.
think
And
if I
how
could,
would,
Well,
sorry
I was gonna
about,
say,
and
well, we
go
have a
ahead.
recycling center already that we use on Saturdays, that people bring their recycling and they bring their white metals and so forth like that. And soon enough, we will hopefully be recycling our e-waste in the next month or so. So to me, that would be perfect location
yeah,
that I
Right.
would to recommend.
if I could, I think this what Karen and I, one of the things that we've learned in the time that we've been working in this process is that mainly Karen telling me that I am moving too fast and have gone too far in the weeds on some of the details. And one of the chief takeaways that we got from Scarsdale, I think most of the people who went on the trip would agree, is that Ron talked about how the process becomes easier when you take one step at a time. And that, the question that you had, Megan, is perfect because it's one of those things that Scarsdale's helped a bunch of towns in this region start programs like this. And the one thing that he said is that you have to be very deliberate and careful about the way you make your decisions. So there's going to be a point, and Rob just brought that up, like this might be a really great place, but we need to sort of talk about this and make sure that whatever solution we come up with, which is one of the benefits of doing it as a pilot program, is going to be best for the town. So we make sure that everyone's included, everyone has an opportunity to participate if they want, but then there's, also to make sure it fits.
Right. I didn't have go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Judy. I
was just going to say I didn't have the opportunity to go on the Scarsdale visit, but do they have staff, or how is it monitored? Because there is a lot of oversight involved, and I know implementation is a word that can mean a lot of things. And the committee is a committee of volunteers, but are there any paid staff involved, or what's the cost involved? And is that something the committee has to work out?
No, well, yes and no. The village of Scarsdale has a DPW. So it is housed at the DPW site, and we have the superintendent or supervisor of their DPW who said he's more than willing to talk to whomever or however we set this up about how little oversight it actually takes to run it. So much of it is education. It's not going to be a moneymaker. It's going to be educating people about how not to end up with the waste there in the first place. But they do have theirs run, and as I say, I can go back to that slide and show you their DPW recycles furniture, books, plastic bags, yard waste. Food scraps is only a very small part of this. And one of the things Eric and I have learned, which is why I think both of us are reluctant to say, this is the way we're going. Every time we've made a step to the right, we've learned 5 more things that said, you should consider this. Even in citing the food scraps, there are considerations that we should, the committee, talk about and then present back to the board for a decision. And the biggest thing is, where do you want this pilot to go? What do you want to happen when the pilot's done? But in terms of manpower, it's run, we'd be looking for volunteers from the community, from the task force, as well as some oversight from the town.
I'm sorry, I just have one more question. Would you guys be interested in working with the school district on something like this to get students to participate on like the higher level, like high school students for volunteers to get their, I mean, they need community service to graduate. So it's something that you would be able to approach Haldane or Garrison with.
I think we're going to be going to the community, you know, with a big C, to look for volunteers and then find appropriate ways for them to help support the program. You know, I was a principal of a school, so in some sense, I think we need to know very carefully what it is we're asking of the children, you know, when we do that. So again, Eric and I have folders of ideas and things we're thinking of, but we really need to have a group help us to focus it and say, this is what we think will work. And this is the direction we think we should go for these reasons.
But Megan, I
But we
think,
will be looking for full community participation.
yeah, I think and I think Karen would back me up on this, over the course of our working on this, and even in the task force, we've had kids from Haldane come to task force meetings. I have personally exchanged emails with teachers and Haldane students about things that they wanted to do, where we've been sharing information and things they've been learning. So I think the lines of communication for that are open. Yeah. So,
Okay.
And there's several students. I know that there's students in the school district that are, you know, that are looking for opportunities to do this kind of work. So I think as we go through the process, like Karen said, as long as we can be clear about the direction that we want to go, I think that that would be on the table.
I also just wanted to add quickly that I know a lot of these things are going to be discussed, you know, probably in the advisor group, but other piece of information from the Scarsdale visit, that Judy, to your point, they have DPW staff around, but they're not always like manning the station. They're around, but it's people are just dropping off their compost. But Bob, to your point, and I know locations up in the air, but at the town's recycling center and old landfill, as Bob, you pointed out at the last board meeting, you know, the town already has Ryan up there from 9 to 2 on Saturdays. So there already is a town paid staff member up there for that recycling. And so that kind of, you know, there is a staff person up there from Saturday 9 to 2. And then the only other context, although it would change for Philipstown, Karen, I wanted to add from that meeting is just to give the board a sense of a context of the cost of this program. Not that it'll be the same, but Scarsdale's, you know, on an annual basis for their drop off, the major cost is the carrier cost, the cost of the person coming and picking up the food scraps and bringing them outside to a composting facility. They released an RFP for that. That was about $5,000 a year. I was surprised it was that low. And then the only other costs were the about $2,500 for the cost of the composting bins that people take home and then bring a bag and drop off. So it's a pretty low cost program. And as Crystal and Karen have pointed out, you know, Crystal's been so successful raising money through the Climate Smart community that there's a lot of money in hand. I think Crystal had said maybe $5,000 already in hand. So, you know, potentially, although the RFP would have to be released for Philipstown, the money's there to start this. It's low cost, but big impact. So that's exciting.
I also want to say that we're looking at an 18-month project pilot to assess, you know, is it working? Is it not working, et cetera. We're also in kind of a unique community because 90+% of our waste is picked up. And there's a real significant possibility of curbside pickup of food scraps if this is successful and people are educated as to how to do it, et cetera. So, you know, it sounds sometimes like we're dodging questions, but there's so many possibilities. You know, the village has a garbage issue. We know that, the village of Cold Spring. There's no reason we can't incorporate some of their needs into this pilot and take into consideration what are they trying to accomplish. We're looking for it to be a town of Philipstown residence drop-off center that works for as many people as we can make it work for.
Sounds exciting.
Great.
Sorry, I have one more question. Who would be doing who's taking it away? Are we still going to be contracting with Royal, or is there another contract? Like, Who
We
would
don't-
pick these up?
You know, those-
Or do we not
those-
know? I don't know. This is just questions that I'm coming up with.
They're growing in number every day. The one thing we know is we don't want to be the carter. You don't want Philipstown to buy a garbage truck and
No.
be carting
No.
this, because then there's
No.
regulations, you know. The number of carters are growing every day. I had a very non-committal discussion going on probably almost a year ago now with Royal. And I said to them, would you be interested? Well, they're already carting food scraps. They get the Culinary Institute, they get other places where they are already carting. So they said they would definitely be interested in talking to us, but I would not commit to Royal because there are so many people who are doing it now, companies. And you know, we're gonna follow, we've been told by Scarsdale, follow that truck to where they're dropping it. So you can say with confidence, it's going to a composting center. And the composting center will work with them to bring compost back to the community.
I think
All
to
right.
piggyback on that one of the stories, sorry, that to sort of shed more light on that a little bit, Scarsdale has offered to help us at every step of the process, even when it comes to, you know, if we hit a roadblock with someone that they deal with, they're willing to call and make, you know, inroads with us. But a quick story that while we were at the presentation in Scarsdale, one of the carters that they used did not ended up starting their own composting facility, if I'm right about that, Karen, where they started off as carting food scraps to somewhere else, realized the possibility, and ended up doing their own composting at their own site. So there's, like Karen said, there's all kinds of possibilities in terms of who we can use. So I think those are the type of things that, as long as we're deliberate about the process, I know I keep saying that a lot, but it really is, it's prudent for us not to rush into answering any questions for the sake of expediency. Especially, that's the benefit of having a pilot program, is that we get to work things out and answer questions as we go.
My
Sounds like
sort of
composting.
my sort
Composting
of
sounds
joke
like
to
a good
people is
business.
invest in garbage.
Yeah.
Composting sounds like a good business. All of your materials are free. Your product materials are free and you get to sell the product. This sounds great.
Yes, this is a call out to all the entrepreneurs out there.
All right, so we have a group together, we have a group formed, and we'll be looking to put it all into play at our February meeting. We'll have the town attorney do it, and we'll do a resolution then and appoint the committee and get the process started, and we'll discuss it some more that night. So anything else? If not, we'll end the meeting.
Excuse me, John, there's a comment in the chat.
Okay, let's make it quick.
No, you just have to read your chat. You want me to read it?
I don't have anything on my screen.
It says there could be funding available through the Haldane School Foundation to engage school students effectively and to be able to fund some direct costs associated with student engagement in the pilot.
Okay, great. We like funds. Anything else there?
No, sir.
All right. Anybody else want to add anything? Questions? Going once? All right, everyone, have a good evening. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Eric.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank
Have
Have
a
a
you.
good night, everybody.
Have a
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Good night.
everybody.
Bye.